So our next speaker is going to be introduced by his mentor, Troy. Where are you? Oh, great. Okay, awesome. So Troy is the aquatic biologist for the Hilo side of the Hawaii Division of Aquatic Resources, what we call DAR here. He is also a graduate of the TCBES program. And for more than a decade, he has provided invaluable leadership and expertise in the restoration and conservation of alkaline pools and other unique aquatic ecosystems across the islands. Known for his deep knowledge, humility, and genuine support for others, Troy is a respected and inspiring figure dedicated to protecting Hawaii's aquatic habitats and the people who depend on them. It is my pleasure and honor to bring Troy up to the stage. Yeah, we can give my hand a clap.
Very mahalo, Lisa, for that beautiful introduction. Aloha, mai kakou. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Andrew Tabaque. I first met Andrew about 2 years ago when he reached out to us to do a casual internship at our Wailoa Fishery Station, basically to just do grunt work. And that evolved into an official graduate internship with the TCBES program. And we've all come to know Andrew as a soft-spoken and very well reserved person, but those traits are in stark contrast to the determination and enthusiasm and aggressiveness that he applied to his project and his entire internship. And we're all very proud of all of the hard work and dedication that he's set forth, and we're looking forward to seeing Andrew apply that to a promising career in the natural sciences. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Andrew Tabaque.
Aloha. Good afternoon again. My name is Andrew, and today my presentation is going to be about Aka'akai, which is a native sedge. Its scientific name is Shonoplectus taberni montani. And my internship was with the Division of Aquatic Resources here in Hilo, who's under the Department of Land and Natural Resources. I'd like to introduce myself to all of you. I was born and raised in Florida, and my parents are from Manila, Philippines, and from Meaford, Canada. But they moved to Florida, and that's where I was born. And I have one older sister and her husband, and I'm very grateful for my family and all they've done and the support they provided to me in this program and their love. So my story here in Hawaii begins in 2017. One day I was just looking on the internet, applying to a bunch of jobs, and I happened to stumble upon an opportunity at the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, where I got to work with rare and endangered plants found nowhere else in the world. And after doing that, I heard of this program called Kupu, and I got to do a few different internships. And it's because of this program that allowed me to work in places like Hokala Wildlife Refuge with some beautiful forests of ohia and koa and really rare forest birds like the akio pola'au. And then I had another internship through Kupu, moving to Oahu on the North Shore in Haleiwa, where I worked with a native Hawaiian nonprofit organization called Loko'ea. And where we did education, restoration of local i'a, which is Hawaiian fish ponds. And after doing those internships, Kupu allowed us to go, or provides a huaka'i, or like a a project where we go with a bunch of other interns. And I was able to go to amazing places such as Kaho'olawe with PKO. I went to Kauai. I've been able to go to Molokai and visit other fish ponds in really amazing places and all of these amazing people. And through all these experiences and the people that I've met, I've grown to love, appreciate, and respect Hawaii, the place that I work and I call home. Words cannot describe the experiences and the people that I've met. And so, because of all of this, I felt empowered to pursue this master's degree so that I can continue supporting Native Hawaiians, community, and make positive contributions for our island home. This is just a few names of the people who I'd like to acknowledge that have given me this opportunity to be here today, as without them, I would not be the person I am and have been able to complete all the work that I've done. There's Mark and Sierra from the National Park Service, Steve, the biologist before at U.S. Fish and Wildlife in Hakalau, Sayo and Uncle Buddy from Local Ea, Nalu, Michaelani, and Trish from Kumuola, Lokelani Brandt, who has done amazing work and very knowledgeable in the history of Waiakea and Hawaii. Ryan Peroy for his remote sensing courses and the GIS class that I got to take from him. He came out and supported me in my project. As well as Natalie, who I took a statistics course from, and Atsuko, who is very knowledgeable in stats, and they helped me a lot on my statistics. Of course, all of my TCBES friends, who I'll never forget, and all the professors that I had, as well as my mentor, Troy, who provided the vision for this project that I got to work on, and everyone at the DAR station. I couldn't have done this without you guys and all of your assistance in this work. So my project or my focus of my internship was doing a literature review of the Waiakea area to kind of get a better understanding of the history of Waiakea and where I'd be working. Restart a native sedge cultivation system or a nursery for the aka'akai, and then develop the best practices to outplant these aka'akai inside the Waiakea area in the pond. And this work, the pilot studies that I did, is to guide a future project of restoring the aka'akai in a section of the pond. And DAR does a lot of work in estuaries, and so they do monitoring and protecting of these ecosystems. And if you're not familiar with what estuary is, estuaries are some of the most productive ecosystems on Earth, and they can look very different based on their physical makeup. But one thing that they have in common is they have a freshwater input and a saltwater input. The freshwater can come from like springs or rivers, underground systems. And then they meet with the oceans, create this brackish water environment. They can be thought of as kind of a transitional habitat between the terrestrial side and the marine side. And here's just a few examples of different types of estuaries found throughout Hawaii. And there's like a few different types, the Laguna estuary, such as Kealia. And then we have more riverine-like estuaries, such as Honolulu. And the one that I worked at is here in Wailoa, in Hilo. And yeah, so from what I've been taught and learned is that it's important to look into the past to guide the future. And there's also a lot you can learn about from history. And I wanted to understand more about the place that I'd be working. And so these are just a few images I found from online. And I learned from talking to people about this area. So Waiakea is the name of the ahupua'a here in the moko of Hilo. And some of the different names that are mentioned is like Waiakea is an estuary, or it can be talked about as Waialoa, or there's the Waiakea Pond or the Waialoa River. So if you hear me talk about that, that's this area over here. And some of the things that I got to learn was around 1700s or before, Waiakea, in this area where the ponds are, was an important place for gathering. It had abundant natural resources. Kamehameha was raised here in part, and also his father. Um, and it was abundant in local i'a, Hawaiian fish ponds, kalo, also forests. There was, I think, a lot of koa to make wa'a. And over time, as we move into like the 1800s, 1900s, there's a lot of development going on with the introduction of sugarcane. Yeah. Then we have like the canning factory being built all along the pond. And then we have Hilo Ironworks, which is still there. And there's also a history of a lot of people building their homes here, Japanese village in Machi. And then there's, of course, the history of tsunamis that has changed our relationship with this area. Today, this area is the Wailoa River State Park. There's the boat harbor there. And it's mainly used for recreation, which dictates how people interact with it nowadays. And one of my hopes through this project of restoring the pond is that through active restoration of the estuary, that we can also restore a reciprocal relationship with the Wailoa. Cattle ranching was another thing introduced here to Hawaii, and with that was a bunch of grasses, the feed. So one of the grasses in particular is the California grass, or paragrass is another name for it. It was introduced from Fiji. And it's a big issue now inside of the pond. So Dara did some studies, and in this map right here, where the orange is or the orangish red, that's the spots where the highest risk for this California grass to take over. And that's exactly what is happening in this satellite imagery over that same area. It's from February 2024. So yeah, California is an invasive species, and it's not just a hazard ecologically, but also is a hazard for our community here in Hilo. So this is a picture of where the bridge is, where the boats go in and out of the harbor. And if a big storm happens, like heavy rains up Malka, the grass can break off, and then it can block and create a hazard for the bridge. So for boaters to go in and out. Ecologically speaking, this plant, this California grass, it blocks out the sunlight when you have thick patches of this grass, which is going to deter the limu or diatoms from being able to regrow, because it needs that the photosynthesis from the sunlight. And that limu is really important because it's the base of the food chain for our native fishes and other organisms inside of the pond. So the vision is to use this plant, which is known as a ka'akai. Before this, I didn't know much about aquatic plants. And so I was able to learn a lot about this plant. It's a type of sedge. And usually sedges have edges, is like a common saying. But this one is actually round. And the invasive one, or maybe not invasive, but the non-native one has edges. But I thought that was interesting. It's found in every single US state and even other parts of the world too. I think it was another place was like China, for example. And it kind of looks like a giant green onion, basically. And some of its benefits include erosion control. So this would be beneficial to stabilize banks. And then imagine in the where the grass is, if there was a ka'akai there and there's water, a big rush of water, the sedge can kind of lay over, and it's pretty resilient. It'll pop back up. It's not as thick and dense like the California grass. It also provides cover, habitat for our native fishes, and birds can use it. And it aids in plant recruitment as it stabilizes the bank. It allows other plants to also have a place to grab hold of when they want to grow. Another interesting thing about this plant that I learned recently was that it can be used with kukui, noni, and sugarcane for treating stomach ailments as like a medicinal use. And then I have been searching for um, this, what do you call it? But I had always heard stories of how this was used for weaving, but then I couldn't find like a source. And I found one recently where it was reported that the stems of this akakai could be used for weaving, like kind of like lauhala mats are made into mats. But this one, the akakai would be weaved into mats and then it would be placed underneath the lauhala, which was more precious, and it prevent that one from getting damaged as much as it's on top of rocks or on the ground. Another really cool thing that I learned about this area in Wailoa is the ama fishery or the native striped mullet. That's sadly been declining. The technique is where you use this melosyra, the diatom, and fishers scoop it up and then throw it out on a floater with a pole, sometimes 2 hooks. But this is a fishing practice that's unique to Hilo. And from talking to, I learned a lot about this from talking to the guys at DAR. And I even found a YouTube video recently. It's called the Let's Go Fishing Show, where they share about this exact fishery. And it was really cool. I even seen the mullet season just opened up recently, and I've seen fishermen lining up with their buckets trying to catch these fish. Unfortunately, today, like I said, this fishery is threatened, and one of the reasons is because of California grass. Like one of that spot I showed earlier, where the California grass is taking over the tributary and the water, is spots that fishermen would fish and throw out their bait, but they no longer can because all of that grass is in the way. And then in addition, you have that grass limiting the growth of the bait that the fishermen use, the diet on. So I'm hoping that with this aka'akai and being able to replant it, restore it out in this area, that we can also bring back the health of the ecosystem, but also it's going to help the health of the community too, who rely on this resource. So yeah, this yellow square in these images is where the Wailoa Fisheries Research Station is, where I did most of my work. It's like the base station of DAR. It's right near Hilo Iron Works, across from the canoes, and where the Wailoa River is. And I created this one map in one of my classes that I thought was pretty cool. It's showing Waiakea Pond and Wailoa River. But I've overlaid I overlaid a map from 1893 and then circled or created polygons over the old map onto this one of some of the fish ponds that were there before. And it's pretty cool, this tool, to be able to show that like, some of the ponds, these are not names like everybody commonly knows, but like Waiakea Pond, a lot of people will know, but there's also Ho'okimau, Kalepolepo, Waihole, and Moho'uli Pond. And so zooming into where that yellow square is, this is this is a part of the station where I did some of my experiments. So in that black tank is where I grew the aka'akai in pots, and then took it to the back of the station where the Wailoa River is, and then outplanted some of them out in the river. So one of my first questions to figure out how to restart the native sedge nursery basically is the stem growth of aka'akai influenced by the pot size and trimming treatments? So this is what the native sedge cultivation system looked like. At first, there was one of the tanks that was filled to the brim with soil, some aka'akai, ahuava, and myself and a few others, we had to dig out this entire tank and then harvest whatever aka'akai was left in there, and then use these pots that were laying around. And we designed this experiment. This experiment was developed like on the fly, basically. There was a total of 22 of the aka'akai plants, and we put them inside of these pots. There was like one 2-gallon pot, And then there was 7-gallon pots, the larger pots. They were just, one was short and one was a bit taller. I just treated them as 7-gallon, 2-gallon. And then I also did this trimming thing where I cut them in half to kind of just see what happens to the growth inside of these pots. Yeah, in each week, what I did is I go back, count the stems, and then record that will show me the growth of the plant. All right, after doing some statistics, I did this linear mixed effects model, and I included week, the cut treatment, initial stem count as fixed effects, as well as the interactions to try and understand how the akakai grows in the pots and if they're cut or not. But this first run, the pot size was not significant. So the growth rate of the stems didn't differ significantly between the 2-gallon pot and 7-gallon pot. So then what I did was I removed it from the model. And what this figure is showing is the predicted stem count over 9 weeks based on how many stems the plant started with. The data was normalized, and what I ended up finding was that plants starting with more stems end up with more stems, as you can see with like the blue line basically. There's the no cutting, the yes, it was cut. If you look at the blue line, it starts with like, if a plant starts with around 15 stems, it's predicted to end with around almost 40. But what was interesting was that if you trim the stem, it actually reduced the growth, but only in the pots that in a plant that would have more stems at the beginning. After that, I wanted to take the plants from in the pot and then plant them in the river. And so I asked another question: is the stem growth of a ka'akai influenced by location and weeding treatments? So in this picture, there's the stars are representing where I planted the plants, and then the red box is the weeding treatment. So I'd go to the I'd weed every other weed the grass around every other plant after I planted it. The reason I planted some on the bank and then some further out in the water was because I had read a study that said that the depth of water that you plant the ka'akai in is going to will determine whether or not it's going to survive. This was in the mainland somewhere, and they were also worried about seasonal patterns. But I didn't think we had to worry about the seasonal patterns too much here. But I basically, evened them out. I planted them evenly spaced. I think it's about, when I planted them on the bank, I made sure that the plants were only going to be submerged, like their roots, when it was a high tide. And then when they're planted out a bit further, even at the lowest tide, their roots are going to always be submerged. And then I would go back each week, weed for a little bit, and then I'd also count all the stems. Hopefully you can see this, but I started with 3 stems. So you can see in my hand in this one photo, I just have 3 stems, and it's a small root mass. But after planting them from September, just over a few months, it went from just 3 to around like, I don't know how many are in this photo exactly, maybe like 40. And they're still going today. But none of the ones in the water survived. So only the ones I planted on the bank survived. And more than half of them are still there. So I think around 9 out of 12 of the plants I planted on the bank are still alive. And I did another model, but this time I had location and weeding as my fixed effects. All of the plants died eventually in the continually submerged. They're the ones that were planted farther out. But in this model, it showed that weeding had a significant effect. So it's important to weed, especially as the plants are growing over time. In the beginning, it didn't seem to make much of a difference, but as time goes on, I think this is because of the grass is growing back. So it's going to make it harder for them to survive if you don't weed them. And then after that, I did another experiment. Now, these are all pretty short, but this is one I'm still working on. And this time I basically did the same thing as the previous experiment, but then I put weed mat around some of the plants. So, yeah, put the weed mat around the plants. And this time there's no plants in the water because from the last one they didn't survive. So I was like, okay, let's just plant them on the bank. And then this time instead of starting with just 3 stems, I put, there's more like 20 stems and it comes straight from the 2-gallon pot. And they were just planted in the ground, about 8 of them, and we mat every other plant. Um, yeah, after doing that, the key takeaways from what I learned was that the small pots, you can get away with using the small pots if you want. And it could save space. So if you have 4 of the 7-gallon pots on the table that go inside of the tank, you know, you can only fit 4 compared to 8 on the 8 of the 2-gallon pots. And it would take less soil to fill the pot. And also an important thing to think about is carrying these out into the field. If you have the 7-gallon pot, it's gonna be a lot heavier to carry out, and then you're gonna have to dig a much bigger hole when you're out planting it. But at the same time, if you start with more stems, you'll end with more stems. We still have to figure out the balance between the 2-gallon, 7-gallon pot. Maybe try potting between that, so that we can plant a good amount of stems so that they have the best chance of surviving. Of course, planting on the bank was the best in this case. I think when I planted them out on the river or a bit further from the bank, the sediment was kind of really rocky, and the plant didn't have a good spot to like stabilize to establish itself in the ground. And yeah, because over time I didn't even see like ones that did survive after a few weeks in the water. None of them really grew any new stems either. So it could be also limited to the nutrients compared to how much is on the bank. There's a lot more soil. And then yeah, weeding around the plants is going to be optimal, but of course it's challenging to continually weed an area, especially if you have a lot of projects going on. And then this area is the future site that hopefully we can outplant some of these Aquatic. So the projects that I did was like a pilot study, so that later in a couple years that we can outplant the Aquatic in this area. So DAR has a project in the works to get some permits to be able to clear some of this grass. This is kind of behind Cafe 100 area. And then outplant the Aquatic out there. It's a small area at first, but you know, it's a start. In addition to my project, I did try this in my last one, the last experiment, using photogrammetry and drones as a monitoring technique for monitoring the growth of the Aquatic. So photogrammetry is basically you take a bunch of photos. It doesn't have to be with a drone, it can be with a camera too. And then it stitches the photos together with this software. And then in addition, if you use these super high tech, like GPS basically, you can get super high resolution imagery. And the resolution of the image, I'll show a couple in the next slide, can be less than like a centimeter in accuracy. And so in my project, I was able to experiment with the drone flight. So in the remote, you can tell the drone to do these flight patterns, and it's going to affect how well your imagery comes out. So I did a bunch of different ones over time to figure out if I take too many photos or too little photos, how it affects the imagery. So there's kind of like a sweet spot if you want to get high resolution images from using the drone. And after you plug it into Pix4D, which is the program I used, you can create these like 3D models. Basically, this is the site, my third experiment site with the weed mat. And those little green things are the GCPs, which are the points where that super accurate GPS was on top of, so that you can get really accurate X, Y coordinates and also Z coordinates if you place it properly on that area. And then you can create like digital elevation models, so get slopes and do a bunch of other pretty cool things. And yeah, this was we don't have access to the like the base the GPS or the I can't think of the word for it right now, but that tool right there. Thanks to the SDAB lab, Ryan, Troy, and Olivia came out and helped show us how to use one of these that hopefully DAR will have in the future, so they can continue doing other stuff like this in the other estuaries. And then after you get that, you can create an ortho mosaic, which is basically like a picture, all the pictures stitched together, and you can plug it into GIS. And then the idea was that you can create little polygons around the plants that were outplanted, and then monitor it over time. And then, but there's a few issues right now, like because the akakai matches so much with the grass, it's kind of hard to see the base of the akakai. But what I've been doing is tying pink string around it recently to see so that the base of the plant actually shows up easier, so I can draw a polygon around it. But this is still in the works. I think it'll be pretty cool because if this is not super time intensive compared to like counting the stems individually, say I've planted like hundreds of plants compared to just 8, this could be a good monitoring technique. Now for my other experiences besides the experiments, I got to go to a few different places. So DAR does a lot of outreach, and one day I got to go to Kahalu, where I got to meet some of the community members that really care for this place. They are always out there. They have signs of sunscreen, like how the sunscreen can damage the coral reefs. A lot of tourists go here. It's a very popular spot. So they do a lot of education to protect this area that they love so much. And then Uncle John here in the photo, and Tyler was talking about some of the regulations and what the community members can do to enforce and protect their area. Oops. I also was able to be a part of a little bit of outreach with education. So a school group from Huihole Maluo came over. It was like elementary school to high school during the summer. They came over, and then DAR had a few stations. Like there was like a station on limu. There was a station on endangered species like the honu and the monk seal. And they went around, and one of the times I gave a little talk on the native fishes that are found in the estuary. Another big thing that DAR does is estuary monitoring. And so one of the techniques that they use is they go out to an estuary, do some throw net sampling to see what kind of fish are in the area. Sometimes it can be blind throws, sometimes it can be through sight. But this technique might not capture what is always around in the area because it's there's bias from if you're sight casting them or not, or you might not see any fish that day, but there still could be fish out there. So this one technique is using this eDNA backpack, which is just another way to keep it cleaner and easier so that you don't contaminate your DNA samples, and it sucks up the water, and then you can just send it off to a lab to see what DNA is captured and what organisms were in the area at this time. Another pretty cool project that I got to go to one day is out in Waiuluula and Kohala. And this is kind of similar to the estuary project where they do throw net samplings, but this one is more of like a baseline study. So collecting some of the invertebrate species, doing water quality, and yeah, establishing this baseline of what's found in this area before they do some water diversion or restoring more flow back to this river. So there's a plan in the works to somehow bring water back to this area. And you need this baseline study so that you can compare before and after. This is another one that I got to take part in, going to different fish ponds to collect some of the ama, the native striped mullet. This is a partnership with HPU, collecting the fin clips and getting the DNA of the native mullet. And then what this is gonna do is gonna be able to see if there's any difference in the subpopulations between the west side and the east side. So it was from all around the island, on this island, collecting different mullet. And then also in the future, this can be useful for management strategies for this native fish, but also for informing stock enhancement projects that could be done at the station. Because you don't want to just release fish that are caught from somewhere else. It's kind of similar with what Ariel was talking about earlier with the genetic diversity of plants. Understanding the founders or where the original fish come from is going to be important when releasing these founders or these fish back out into the wild that are grown in an aquaculture setting. And then, yeah, another cool thing that I got to take part of is the geospatial workshop that was done with Megalab, and this kind of inspired me a lot with the drone stuff to kind of learn. Well, I had never heard of photogrammetry before or anything like that. And so this inspired me to take GIS and remote sensing here in this program. And then thinking about everything that I've done in this program, it was a real struggle, and hands down one of the most challenging things I've ever put myself through with all of the work that we have to do in this program. I was doing the internship, I was working at Target, I also worked at Pack for a little, and then of course all the classes on top of that. It really burnt me out sometimes, but I learned to accept help, especially from my family, my friends and loved ones. I learned to ask help from my friends, my coworkers, even my professors, and I couldn't have done this alone without the help of everyone and having such an amazing support system. And yeah, that's it. Is there any questions? Oh, okay.
What kind of soil did you use for
Oh, like the pots.
Yeah.
I don't even know exactly what soil it was. It was soil that I found in the shed. Yeah, it was like potting soil. Basically potting soil you catch. Yeah, from Home Depot. I mixed it with the what's that white like powder stuff. Perlite, yeah. I put in some half perlite, half soil. And then also rocks. You have to put rocks on the bottom of the pot because the pots are in water, and if you don't, they float up. Did you have a question?
Oh, question.
Oh.
Super cool presentation and really awesome project. Why a Kawakaia?
So in the one, it was from one of these old photos, like the first photo on my slide. It's found here before.
Okay.
And so that's why, and we had access to it. It's actually really hard to find native aquatic plants for estuaries, and there's a lot of places that sell forest plants and stuff like that, but trying to find these native aquatic plants is difficult. Okay, sorry, the light is blinding. Ariel?
Good, great talk. What, do you think you could grow them from seeds or is it just cuttings?
Yeah, definitely seeds too. That was one of the things I actually want to try next. Because what I did here is you can just cut the roots and then basically split the plant. But I've been told by another biologist that has actually grown these before from seed. And that's, yeah, something I want to try next. Oh, Randall?
Yeah, a couple of slides back, it mentioned phytoremediation.
Oh, yeah.
Did you look into what exactly is that, like heavy metals?
Yeah, yeah, from what I read, heavy metals. As far as anything past that, I'd have to do more research, but that was one of the benefits I thought about. Because there's a lot of arsenic and other metals from, all of those factories, in the area. Yeah, river.
Wonderful presentation. You mentioned how you hadn't, you had experience in other places, but in terms of like aquatic plants, not so much, and you began like researching more. And now that you're at the, near the end of your internship, how do you feel that the experience has informed like uh, what you want to do, like maybe career wise or within the next few years, like
I think so. As far as my career has been going, I do like coastal habitats, and I think learning about sedges is just another cool thing I got to learn. Like I learned a lot about fish before. Yeah, there's just always so much to keep learning about a habitat, an ecosystem. It's not just the fish, it's not just the limu, but everything that makes up that area is super important. And yeah, I didn't know. I knew like some plants, like for example, or ahuava, but I never knew this one. And so I think, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Okay.
Okay.
Question from the chat from Brian Caroy.
Oh,
So just imagine his voice from it. Nice work and presentation. For your outplantings, what do you think will happen to those if you stop actively weeding? Will they persist or get covered by weeds?
um, let's see. Let me think. So one of the things that has happened is if the akakai can get big enough, I think they'll survive. Because that's what I saw in one of them. But at the same time, I've also been told through experience from other people at DAR that they've planted these before, and that if you don't, take care of the area, this California grass is just, and all the weeds are just so tenacious. They're gonna take over, unless you weed, I think. Unless you get unless we can really plant a lot of akakai or other more not just akakai, but a diverse amount of plants.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question.
Okay.
And then this will be the last question. So you had this fabulous opportunity to be exposed to all these management practices and research techniques that that DAR does, and also explore maybe something they can add to their tool set. My question for you is that, DAR's kind of known for doing best practices. Is there anything that you think might be missing, or anything that you might want to have them do more of in terms of the work that they're already doing?
I don't know if there's anything more they need to do. At least here in Hilo, in the dark that I've worked with, they all do an amazing job, and I couldn't be more happier with being able to work with them. I just am so happy to go and meet with them at the station. It's really fun, and all of them work very, very hard in what they do. And so I think they're doing it right now.
Okay. Awesome. And before we go, do you want to just share a little bit about what's up with you for summertime?
Oh, summertime. Well, I get to go and do scientific diving training. So I got accepted into Quest program yeah, so I'm gonna be doing that.
Yeah.
Visit my family, my chapter.
Awesome. Thank you so much.